So this is my DJ. I call her Mel because I knew a DJ named Mel. But I also worked in nightclubs in the early 90s. So I had the chance to hang out and enjoy, and not so much enjoy, rave culture. So the EDM and the house music and acid jazz stuff that came later. It was an interesting time. We decided to make something fun with it. We were in a position where people were still, Burning Man was not that old, and people were doing crazy stuff with parties in between the times when Burning Man started and ended, and then the rest of the year. There were people who were doing crazy stuff at Burning Man. We're also doing interesting things in San Francisco and Oakland and similar places around the Bay Area. We decided to make, more dances, the dance floor itself, which would change color. And there's a whole system behind that dance floor, behind how the DJ booth works and the way you can play the different music out of it. But the craziest thing was this: we made a hookah. Here's some of my original designs for that, which would also later be the model for the oxygen bar, which was also a thing of the era. But you can see some of the stuff. This is original pencil with marker. Here's the original sketch off of it. And then we made it so that these different pipes could actually drop down and you would have little cloud or some other kind of cushion to work with. And at the end of the day, our original one was what looked like orange candy. And it was a water pipe, but it was bubble blower. So, there was some backlash to it, but the stigma itself was, it was useful for people to look at it and go, what the heck, more than it was for anyone to go, that should be illegal, get rid of that. It was a bit controversial for some, but then again, we had a bunch of hippie deadhead-ish people working with us. So turning to the side and saying, hey, how do you feel about this? You might have just gotten someone and go, dude, it's fine, it's great, whatever. So when I built this template, it was something that had to have, I think it was 5 separate states just to handle having these, and then eventually I think it became an accessory that the sim held on to, and we just made, don't quote me on this, but we just made the individual pipes go away. So you can see that. I believe it's an accessory because it's both being held in the right hand. So you make the thing go away and you just hold on to the pipe, and while you're playing the animation and you put it back and it turns back on as part of a sprite. If someone knows for sure, please mention in the comments below. This is to match what we were doing. It's just to basically being able to turn on and off or change things. Okay, so these are my original weird designs for sculpture, tables, the refrigerator and the bar, and individual art pieces. A lot of this came from my love of the fake ice made of acrylic and other stuff. I ran it by Kevin Byall, most of it, because he's a accomplished sculptor, and who was and still is someone who makes stuff for public display and Burning Man. As well as, one of the original Burning Man creators, John Law, got a lot of us in love with neon. He is a neon expert, as well as being a urban spelunker. But we wanted the fake plastic ice, we wanted these different things, and this would return later as part of Vacation as well, because we had Winter Wonderland, and we were able to reuse the ice and make things good with it. You can see how this follows the actual pattern, the template that we had started in Living Large and then moving over into House Party. So this is where our bar structure comes from, that initial one we made in Living Large. But it was a lot of fun trying to get that effect and also make it self-contained, so we didn't lose any people. I guess we didn't lose them on the side of suspension of belief, because it was contained, and it was shown within these different contexts in recessed areas, so it never really got out of hand with people going, why isn't it casting light around? Or no one really mentioned that too much. Likewise, we made things, especially in this pack, starting in that art direction forward, purpose forward, interaction forward strategy. So in 3D you can make these things work fairly well by actually putting something. You don't have an actual like one layer, you have two layers. You have the same object and it's transparent or translucent in one direction and opaque in the other. So and you'll flip what are called the normals on it, so that the outside layer, you will never see the one with, you can't see through, because the back side is normals facing in and the outside is normals facing out. So you'll be able to look in there and sort of get the idea that it's transparent and translucent, but you won't really be able to see through it. It has just enough see-through edginess to make it feel like it is both plastic and inflatable, and you don't have to worry about clipping through anything because you've basically done the equivalent to put an egg inside an egg and made the inner egg facing out and the outer egg facing in, and then that inner egg is translucent, and therefore it's just almost, it feels almost four-dimensional to people who have not seen it and done it that way, but it's really cool. And you make things like this. So you can't actually see that line behind here. There's enough refraction and reflection spoofed in this to just make it look like you can see through, but it's not, and it just, I love the way that stuff looks. We also made seats to go with things like this in case we wanted to run those cabinets and then make it look like you've made a bar with bar stools. Okay, DJ booth. We wanted this one to look accurate enough so that as the animations were being, the avatar, the DJ that was spinning was using it, we could actually have points on it that looked effectively like they were putting needles on records, vinyl records, and then fiddling with knobs. And especially at that angle, they could be moving stuff so that you saw them changing volumes and crossfading, but they never were actually doing it, and we didn't have to move anything. So that was a win. This was a lot of fun because it's the size that it is, and it creates that you can still see most Sims when they walk behind you. You might get to see part of the head, but you don't lose them completely. We just pop these out to make a separate object, very economical. This kind of stuff also, we made it so that you aren't going to look at anything and see the light spilling, or you expect that this was going to be putting a circle somewhere on a wall, but because you can't see it, and you can't see it light, you're only worrying about what's facing you, and that is just too much of a cheat. Okay, dance floor. This is pretty self-explanatory. Within these spaces, this is 4 separate pieces, so that's 1 full tile. And we basically have a controller underneath that knows what each tile is going to display and the adjacency involved, and if you have a certain number of tiles involved, it will know what kind of sequences it can run. This is a little different than things that I have done on other projects where I actually made a sprite sheet that played underneath these kinds of things, and we had a separate transparency layer, or we just acted as if it was LEDs that were being these images were being cast upon. So I can show something about that in a moment, but this was a lot of fun because when we did the animations for this stuff, you were able to do things a little bit more dancey than just the aerobics, the con aerobics. And so the hard part for, I think, the programmers was to make sure that these people were doing stuff facing each other on occasion, or they were facing the same direction, or how to decide what that was going on with that. It was very designer-oriented discussion going on, and I was like, I just want them to be able to change and do things together, and they were able to pull that off pretty well, so that things were syncing and playing non-synced and still looking good. Yeah, gotta love those inflatable things, how this stuff worked. This was psychedelic-y, but we toned down the cushions and made sure that the detail carried the interest on this, because the Sims, the outfits we were doing for them were bright, and so we were going to have people paying more attention to the Sims and what they were doing than the actual function of the object, which in itself was pretty cool. But you can see how those things like seamlessly pop together, and it does look like a regular fun kind of bar, like a theme bar. These cages were just we animated the people at that height. They aren't using standard dances, and they're hanging off of these things and spinning around inside of it. So once you get up in there, you're in your own little world, and the dances are all animated off the ground to go along with that spoofed light changing tile, as if it were on the dance floor. So that and the moving lights just make it a lot of fun. They kind of make up for the fact that these guys aren't doing almost anything except acting like a very limited stoplight. Oh yeah, there we go. Lots of fun. There's not a lot to say about this stuff other than the superlative music that was being done for us. These we would use these interesting pieces of jewelry. We got to do all sorts of different scenic stuff that was fun. These are the lights that made the biggest difference as far as spoofing nightclub lighting, because they were very active, and because they were shaped like baby versions of the World Destroyer apocalypse device from Star Trek, the original series. It was a lot of fun to just have them flashing and being up there. This guy, it was really a godsend to be able to just make these things and make it so that they look like they were lit, but that they were not spilling light on anything else to try and like destroy the illusion. So, I mean, that's generally the rave stuff. I spent several years working at different places where they had people wandering around dressed as nurses, where they had vodka, Kool-Aid in syringes. Likewise, places where people looked like they came out of a, D-Light music video. These were all fun stuff to make. To animate the DJ booth was funny. I don't know if I did that or I gave it to Kevin, but it's kind of blurry. But it's just a lot of fun to make this stuff happen and to draw these things out, and then to have them show up looking good, and be able to feedback on them a little bit to try and get something out of them. I mean, look at the beautiful just color inside these things. I love that green. It's not truly an acid kind of green. It is slimy green. Likewise, these orange, magenta, green, just pretty colors. Good work. Simulated band albums. And this was good because we were sitting in another part of the office for most of the people working on Sims Online and different SimCity-ish products. And I love her so much. Only now do I see she's kind of like a little too wall-eyed and a little but this was from a very small sketch, and I just fleshed out and said like this, and they were like, oh, okay. And a lot of times we make these things happen, they're not done. We just hand stuff off when the idea is there, and we see what the artist does with it, and they usually knock it out of the park if you give them enough time, enough guidance, and you let them know the purpose of the thing, because once the purpose is nailed, it's solid.